So spoke Tom Barter, and his temper about such a trifle might be considered as a premonitory sign that he was not completely impervious to the distant hum of the catastrophic avalanche. At that very moment, as the three of them reached the gate into Tor Field, the obedient and respectful Codfin was helping Betsy Chinook to ascend a complicated system of precipitous workmen's ladders which now connected the interior floor of St. Michael's Tower with its ruined belfry, and this again with its airy summit. Here, once more, the mayor's tireless architect from London had been at work, for the communal council had decided that if a light circular wooden staircase were erected inside from bottom to top, it would be possible to charge a shilling's admission to this magnificent watchtower, which would greatly increase their weekly revenue. Alone among the council's recent expenditures, this invasion of St. Michael's Tower interested the vicar of Glastonbury, who regarded it as the beginning of that rebuilding of the old church of which he had been talking so long. Mr. Decker had indeed several times of late, before even Penny Pitches was down in her kitchen, slipped out of his lonely house and ascended the hills and climbed all these ladders in order to challenge the sunrise and to think about Nell and about his son. They were not difficult ladders to climb, and being inside so narrow a space, a climber was not so liable to dizziness as would have been the case if they had been propped up on the outside. Not a soul in Glastonbury, if we rule out the infuriated spirit of Gwynab Nudd as too unsubstantial a presence to be called a soul, had beheld the Quantock's man's dark figure, standing erect up there at dawn, defying his ancient enemy as it rose like an enormous red balloon out of Bridgewater Bay, and praying there for his son and for his son's lost girl. It was not the first time that Codfin had attended Mr. Evans's Grail messenger upon a climbing adventure, and if overpowering sexual passion had not made the woman's knees shake, very much as Mr. Evans's own knees did when he opened the unpardonable sin, Codfin would have got her to the top very easily. To the top he did eventually get her, after a long rest of the black worm-eaten Jacobean oak beans that were all that was left of the ancient belfry. And if Gwynab Nudd had been more than a substantial presence, he would surely have taken these two for a real witch being helped to her pulpit of far-flung curses by her attendant demon. Once at the top and leaning over the edge like two medieval gargoyles, Codfin snuffed the pure twilight with aesthetic rapture. The fact that he was, in less than half an hour, going to commit murder rather enchanced their otherwise this natural ecstasy. How could Codfin contemplate so calmly, as he surveyed this aerial landscape, the idea of putting to death a person who had never done him any harm, simply because he was moved to this maniacal issue by this crazy woman? How could Codfin, when he himself enjoyed in so intense a fashion the physical thrill of breathing this fragrant twilight, deliberately condemn another man to eternal unconsciousness, and himself to an almost certain death in a prison courtyard? I just want to check something. Okay, whatever. The fating of hired assassins, and such really was Codfin, though what hired him was religious awe for his witch queen, must be of a different nature from those of all other murderers. Completely devoid of any previous personal attitude to their allotted victim, they take upon themselves to establish between them the most personal of all attitudes. But how could Codfin risk the gallows for the sake of the frenzy of Mad Bet? Ask the fanatic devotee of some strange idol how he can risk death to avenge his deity. Mad Bet had become Codfin's deity. Yeah, we figured that out. To obey Mad Bet had become Codfin's religion. Between two unpleasant experiences, the hangman's rope, which he had never felt, and the look of reproach in Mad Bet's eyes when which he had felt, he selected, without giving the alternative so much as a second thought, the one that shocked his imagination the less. Compared with the problem of Codfin, however, how easy, how natural was that of Mad Bet. Mad Bet was actuated, just as Mr. Evans had been, till the nakedness of Mr. Good's daughter exercised it, by the nerve worm of sex. To be middle-aged, to be of personal hideousness that was revolting, to be threatened by this country asylum, to be the laughingstock of the children of several streets, to have a skull under your hat, bald as an egg. All these things weigh in the balances as nothing when that little nerve worm begins to heave and froth and spit. "There and be, do ye see him, missus?" cried Codfin suddenly, lowering his head below the level of the battlements, and pressing his companion's shoulder to force her to crouch down. "Thee be sure 'twont make him suffer, Fintaller," she said, as their four eyes watched the three figures entering Torfield. I've noticed I've kind of settled on a pirate voice for Glastonbury people. Well, that's okay. Pirate, Irish, pirate, kind of goes back and forth now. But it's better than the Jamaican, Australian thing I was doing for a while. Codfin emitted a faint chuckle at this. "Didn't ye see, Thick Bar?" he whispered. "Thick Bar did make me poor arm ache with carrying un. Thick Bar be enough to stunny an elephant." "Oh, me king, oh, me love, oh, me sweet marrow," cried the madwoman from the bottom of her warm-driven heart. "Don't ye let they see thee head over edge of tower," remarked the other calmly. "I be going down now, and don't ye scream nor cry out anythink when I do it. And don't ye holler at Thick Barter catches hold of I. Just ye stay where ye be till all be quiet. And don't ye say nothing, either to no one, when tomorrow's be come, and they've put poor Coddy in canary cage. As Fintaller scrambled quickly down the long ladder to the belfry, and then down the others to the floor, he said to himself, "I knewed Mr. Curiosity wouldn't come after all his talk. They schollards what reads of fornications wouldn't fuggle a fly, nor them as reads of stiff uns would drown a cat. But I won't tell tales of Coddy neither, for fears of own skin." With these sagacious comments upon human psychology, Mr. Toller went calmly to the place where he had propped up his murderous weapon. Chance or fate, or the air squadrons of Gwip Ab Nud, seemed resolved to make Mr. Toller's task as easy as possible that night. When the three friends reached the top, they turned around and stood panting and out of breath on a ledge of grass a yard or so below the threshold stone of the tower. Tossie quickly turned their attention to the vast, sad, greenish-colored plain stretched out before them. And even before they had got their breath, she entangled them in the absorbing and piquant subject as to exactly at what spot in the airy map their own Northloud house was situated. This was where Chance, capital C, or the spirit of Gwyn ap Nudd, was so favorable to Codfin. For unless the girl had started some especially beguiling topic the second they paused, John would almost certainly have gone straight to the tower, following the natural human instinct of obtaining an objective and also being a personal fondness for touching cold stones with his hand, and thus made it impossible for the assassin to steal forth from that door with a monstrous piece of iron on his shoulder. This is, however, exactly what the murderer was permitted now to do. Step by step, as the girl pointed towards one spot and John pointed towards another, and Barter protested that both were too far to the south, Finn Toller came softly and quietly down the slope behind them, with the iron bar now lifted up in both his hands. Nature, the great healer, is also the great destroyer. And the tendency to giggle at the same things and at the same second, which had wiped out all memories of Gladman's house for Barter, now wiped out for him all memories of every kind. For a remark that John now made started off the pair of them uttering such ungovernable peals of laughter that Barter was forced to shift his position a little. In that shifting of his position, he saw in a flash the figure of Codfin standing behind John, and he realized in the twinkling of an eyelid that the hideous instrument in the tramp's hand was already trembling in the air. The inevitable material laws of balance, of rhythm, of gravitation, of dynamics, had already decided that the iron bar was going to descend on John's head. What they had not counted on, or taken into their mechanical consideration, was the automatic swiftness, swifter than the descent of death itself, with which the instinct of a Norfolk gentleman could express itself in action at a deadly crisis. To ward off this blow, to arrest this descent of the iron bar, Barter now plunged forward, with the natural result that, in place of the thing descending on his friend's head, it descended on his own, cranking his skull full above the forehead and killing him instantaneously. Moment of silence for Tom Barter, huh? Jeez. Just as 25 years ago the young Tom had come so often to John's rescue when their boat got entangled in the weeds of the Wessie, so the grown-up Tom, father of twins and husband of Tossie Stickles, now gave up his life for the same friend on this Somersetshire hill. And frankly, he wasn't worth it. He was killed instantaneously, the front of his skull being bashed in so completely that bits of bone covered with bloody hair surrounded the deep dent which the iron made. His consciousness, the I am I of Tom Barter, shot up into the ether above them like a released fountain jet, and quivering there pulsed forth a spasm of feeling in which outrage, ecstasy, indignation, recognition, pride, touched a dimension of being more quick with cosmic life than Tom had ever reached before in his 37 years of conscious existence. This heightened, nay, this quadrupled awareness dissolved in a few seconds after its escape from the broken cranium, but whether it passed with its personal identity intact into that invisible envelope of rarefied matter which surrounds our astronomic sphere, or whether it perished irrevocably, the present chronicler knows not. Well, let's leave it at that, I guess. Well, sorry to end on a sad note, but people are dying. It's getting to be the end of the book. I know one more character is going to die at least, because I read a fucking spoiler alert earlier. Some jackass wrote on the New York Times or something. Anyway, till next time, I'll see you in Glastonbury. Cheers.